Damned if you do, damned if you don't. That's basically the slogan for guarding Mark Price in the pick and roll. Go over the screen, and he goes past you. Go under the screen, and you probably just gave up 3 points. Double him, and Price is splitting it. Easy layup, or pull-up jumper, every single time. And you can't forget about the screener, because Mark Price definitely won't. One of the most complete point guards to play the game, Mark Price was a star at Georgia Tech for 4 years, before becoming the engine that powered the underrated Cleveland Cavaliers from the late 80s to the mid-90s. Price pushed the pace and kept defenses on their heels for over a decade, even joining the prestigious 50-40-90 club during his career. But Price and the Cavs often ran into one man and one team who shut the door on them year after year, which has caused many of the members of those teams to be overlooked as the years go by. But without Mark Price, those Cavs teams are nowhere near as successful as they were. And with Mark Price, they were never out of a game. Let's jog your memory. An Oklahoma native, Mark Price would spend his high school years at Enid High in Enid, Oklahoma, where Price was a standout for the Plainsmen from the moment he arrived. And he only helped himself get more recruitment attention by playing in the National Junior College Olympics as the point guard for a dominant Oklahoma Rams AAU team. And by the time his senior season rolled around, Price had become one of the top recruits in the state, which wasn't a huge surprise, as he had grown up around basketball, watching his dad coach at a high level, and he had good competition around him all the time, as his younger brother Brent would go on to have his own decade-long NBA career. But throughout Mark's senior season, the other teams just couldn't really figure out how to stop a player as complete as Price, with Price leading Enid to an appearance in the state championship game, while acting as the top scorer in the state. But in a bit of a surprise move, he wouldn't stay in state for college, as he would instead choose to attend Georgia Tech, saying that he really liked the overall makeup of their program and that playing in the ACC was an added bonus. Part of the reason Price joined Georgia Tech is because he would get immediate playing time, which he did, as the future of the team became clear quickly, with the freshman guard-forward tandem of Price and John Salley. And Price showed from the very beginning that he was going to be a problem for the next 4 years, scoring 25 points in the season opener, and continuing that scoring pace throughout the year, as the long bomber averaged 20.3 points, which also made him the first freshman to lead the ACC in scoring. And defensively, Price was a pest, averaging 2 steals per game as well, with the freshman guard being named the ACC's top newcomer, and even a second-team all-conference member, as it was becoming clear early that the keys to the team were being handed to the freshman guard. And with the addition of Price, a Yellow Jackets offense who had been one of the lowest scoring in the country last year would score over 12 more points per game in 83. But the trade-off was that they went from one of the top defenses to one of the worst, which led to them getting off to a mediocre start. And then when conference play hit, they were often overmatched, with Georgia Tech finishing with a losing record. Then while they would get through Maryland in the first round of the conference tourney, they fell to Virginia the following night to end their season, with Price's freshman year seeing him average about 20.5 points, 3.5 assists, and 2 steals per game. So after Price spent his summer playing in the Pan Am Games, he rejoined a Georgia Tech team who looked capable of big things, after bringing in freshman guard Bruce Dalrymple to take some of the scoring load off of Price. And while Price's points dropped, he still led the team in scoring, and with defenses not being able to throw everything at Price, the guard could get more open shots, shooting nearly 51% from the field this season, and upping his assist numbers, as he also led the team in that category, with this year seeing him named a first-team all-conference member, and rightfully so, because even as a sophomore, Price's opponents knew that he was one of the best guards in college basketball, and Tech got out to a hot start, winning 11 of their first 12, which included a win over a number 8 ranked Wake Forest team. But again, when conference play came, Tech had their struggles. Yet with wins over ranked teams in Maryland and Duke, they were showing that they were capable. They were just missing the consistency. But with an 18-9 regular season record, progress had definitely been made. However, their ACC tournament came to an end in the quarterfinals versus Duke, as Price was called for a charge on his game-tying attempt in overtime. And while they wouldn't get a bid to the tournament, they would receive an NIT invite. However, this was over quickly as well, after losing to Virginia Tech in round 1, as Price ended the year with averages of about 15.5 points, 4 assists, and 2 steals per game. Price was back in '85 with something to prove, not only because Georgia Tech had ended the last 2 seasons disappointingly, but also because Price had been cut from the Olympic team over the summer. And the Yellow Jackets began the season ranked 20th in the nation, and would see that ranking climb as they got off to a 10-1 start, with Price once again acting as the team's top scorer and distributor while giving the team his usual 2 steals per game. And now Georgia Tech was making some noise, as not only a great ACC team, but a great team altogether, as while Price was once again named first team all-conference, he would even get a consensus second team All-American selection. And when ACC play rolled around, Georgia Tech was holding their own, and after going 4-1 over a 5-game stretch, which included them defeating 3 ranked opponents, they themselves achieved their highest ranking of the season, at number 6. And while they sputtered over the final few weeks of the year, they still finished the regular season at 21-7, their first 20-win season in 15 years. And then came the ACC tournament, where Georgia Tech would outlast both Virginia and Duke to get a spot in the conference championship versus UNC, who they had defeated in both regular season meetings. But this game started horribly for Tech. The Yellow Jackets couldn't get the lid off the basket, and Price was cold to start. But Sally kept them in it at the beginning until Price started heating up midway through the first half. Then a second half comeback would be completed after Price hit 4 clutch free throws in the final seconds to give Georgia Tech their first conference tournament championship since 1938, and more importantly, a bid to the NCAA tournament. And Price would come out and drop 14 points in a tougher than expected first round win over Mercer. Then they would easily defeat Syracuse in round 2, as Price had 18. The Sweet 16 was Price's best, as he dropped 20 points on 9 of 12 shooting to defeat Illinois. But the run came to an end versus Georgetown in the Elite 8, as Price was held to 13 points. But overall, Price's junior season ended with him averaging about 16.5 points, 4.5 assists, and 2 steals per game. The '86 Yellow Jackets fielded one of the best rosters in program history, still led by the senior duo of Price and John Sally, yet now along with Dalrymple, they had sophomore wing Dwayne Farrell and freshman forward Tom Hammonds, as Georgia Tech was balanced and dangerous on both ends of the court. But Price was still their leader, putting up his highest scoring average since his freshman season, while shooting a blistering 52.8% from the field. And passing-wise, his 4.4 assists were a career high. And after dropping an early season game to Michigan, they caught fire, rattling off 15 straight wins. And then in conference play, they would go 11-3, with 2 of those losses coming to the top-ranked team in the nation, in North Carolina, led by star big man Brad Daugherty, with their second meeting being a matchup of the top 2 teams in the nation, and Georgia Tech almost got them.
Looks to get it in, and the ball knocked away by Price. He takes it to the basket. The shot will not count.
As with the Jackets down 2 with seconds left, Price stole the ball and looked like he had just set up an and-one opportunity, but the foul was called on the ground. And after Price missed the second free throw, UNC was able to escape with the win. But overall, when the regular season wrapped, Georgia Tech had totaled 23 wins and were the number 4 ranked team in the nation. Then after defeating Clemson in the ACC tourney, a last-second Price turnover in the semis versus Maryland looked to give the Terps a chance to end Georgia Tech's repeat bid with the final shot, until Dwayne Farrell stole the ensuing inbounds and converted on the and one, as the Jackets had stolen the game and were set to take on Duke in the conference championship. Yet they would come up just short, as they lost to the Blue Devils by 1 point, but they had still done enough to make a return to the NCAA tourney. And after Price dropped a team-high 20 points, Georgia Tech got out of the first round with a win over Marist. Round 2 versus Villanova was a tougher test, but another 20-point outing from Price pushed the Jackets through to the Sweet 16, where they would run into LSU. And although Price notched his 3rd straight 20-point game, it wasn't enough, as LSU pulled off the upset. And another first-team all-conference season for Price came to an end with him averaging about 17.5 points, 4.5 assists, and 2 steals per game. So now Price was graduated, and while he had been without a doubt one of college basketball's top players in each of his past 4 years, at just 6 feet tall and 170 pounds soaking wet, his size was a major concern to NBA scouts and was really affecting his draft stock. Mark Price fell to the first pick of the second round by the Dallas Mavericks, but a Cleveland Cavaliers team who had entered the draft without a coach, GM, or director of player personnel decided to make a move to acquire Price, sending a second-round pick in the '89 draft to Dallas to acquire his rights, as this capped off one of the best team drafts of all time, as on top of acquiring Price, the Cavs had taken Brad Daugherty with the first overall pick, and then 7 picks later, they selected Miami of Ohio swingman Ron Harper. And on top of these guys, they had also selected a forward in last year's draft named John Williams, who was forced to sit out his rookie year due to being involved in a trial for a point-shaving scandal, of which he was eventually found not guilty. So without exaggeration, Cleveland had basically built their team overnight. But they still needed a GM and a coach, so they would bring in Wayne Embry to manage the team and a former star point guard to coach it, in Lenny Wilkins. But their rookie point guard would spend his season as a backup to veteran John Bagley. Yet originally, the second-round pick wasn't even guaranteed a roster spot until he signed a 2-year deal shortly before the season. Yet when the season started, it was looking like Price might not be able to adjust to the size and speed of the NBA, as he had a lot of early season struggles, and overall would barely shoot 40% from the field as a rookie. Yet he would also have his appendix removed mid-season, and it wasn't all bad, as Price would give glimpses, such as a season-high 27-point outing versus Philly in mid-December. And while Price had underwhelmed in year 1, it was too small of a sample size to make a final verdict. Yet their other rookies showed a lot more promise, so while it was only a 31-win season, there was optimism in Cleveland, as Price's rookie year wrapped up with him averaging about 7 points, 3 assists, and half a steal per game. So if you want an idea of how much faith the Cavs had in Price after year 1, look no further than their first-round selection in the '87 NBA draft, as with the 7th pick, they took Cal guard Kevin Johnson. And while Johnson played the 2 in college, he was drawing some pretty impressive point guard comparisons. So it seemed like it was him, not Price, who would be the Cavs' lead guard of the future. But for now, the Cavs had traded away Bagley, and an excellent camp from Price, who was on the final year of his rookie contract, led to him being named the team's starting point guard for the '88 season. Then in just his 5th game of the season, Price recorded 20 points and 10 assists to notch his first career double-double. And with each game, Price was improving. He was playing quick, but he wasn't playing rushed.
Wow, he is tremendously quick. A lot of people thought he wouldn't be as quick when he came out of Georgia Tech. How wrong they were.
He was getting to his spots and taking the shots he wanted, as after barely cracking 40% shooting last year, he shot over 50% this year. And on top of that, he was making nearly 49% of his three-pointers, which got him his first of 4 career selections to the three-point shootout. And while he didn't win, that wasn't the focus, as Price had completely flipped a switch. With legit minutes came legit production, and a dangerous pick-and-roll partnership was forming with him and Daugherty. So Price went from scoring in double figures 16 times last year to 66 times this year, as he would even act as Cleveland's 3rd leading scorer. And with 9 double-doubles to his name, he was a complete point guard. But the Cavs needed more size and defense down low, and had a deal on the table for star Suns forward Larry Nance. The only non-negotiable was that Phoenix wanted one of their point guards. And while Cleveland didn't want to part with either, they decided to keep the man who had been leading them all season, opting to send a package including Johnson to Phoenix. And after the Nance trade, a 28-28 Cavs team would go 16-12, as their 42-40 record got them their 2nd playoff berth of the last decade, where they would take on an up-and-coming Chicago Bulls team led by their star shooting guard. Price's playoff debut saw him put up a 17-point, 12-assist double-double, but a 50-piece from Jordan got the Bulls the win. Then after Jordan went for 55 the next game, the Cavs were in an 0-2 hole, but Price would get them back in the series with a 31-point performance on 11 of 14 shooting in Game 3. Then with a Game 4 win, it was winner take all going into Game 5 in Chicago. And while Cleveland looked like they were going to run away with it, they let Chicago back in the game and ultimately lost their first series with Jordan's Bulls, as Price would finish year 2 with averages of about 16 points, 6 assists, and a steal per game. During the offseason, Price would sign an offer sheet with Washington, but after the Cavs had parted with one promising guard, they weren't going to let the other one get away, as they matched the offer, and now had one of the most promising cores in place. And while they had lost in round 1, the Cavs were just getting started. So part of the reason the Cavs weren't able to rack up more wins during the regular season last year was because Harper missed 25 games. But now he was healthy, and they had a full season with Nance. And they would show how good they could be with Mark Price leading them, as not only did he put up one of the highest scoring averages of his career to tie for the team lead, he also found himself near the top of the league when it came to passing the ball, as this would mark the first of 7 straight seasons, averaging at least 7 assists per game. And on defense, Price was forcing turnovers, as while he was never exactly a lockdown defender, John Stockton would explain that Price was no joke on the defensive end, tough and quick, and never backed down from the bigger man, as he would rather fight through a screen than switch. But when you talk about Mark Price, you talk about efficiency, and this season was his masterpiece. 2 years earlier, Larry Bird had created a new club, the 50-40-90 club, yet going into this season, he was the only member. But in '89, Price became member number 2, shooting 52.6% from the field, 44.1% from deep, and 90.1% from the free throw line. Whether Price was operating in transition or the half court, he could stop on a dime for a picture-perfect pull-up jumper, or dart past you with his quickness to get to the hoop. And when he got the pick and roll going with Nance or Daugherty, you were at his mercy, as he would earn his first career All-Star selection and a third-team All-NBA selection. And Cleveland was cooking, winning as many as 11 straight games this season on the back of one of the league's stingiest defenses. And while they would finish with the East's second-best record at 57-25, this would only get them the 3rd seed. However, Price and the Cavs had struggled after one event in a mid-season game. The Cavs were sitting at 41-12 and about to get win number 42 as time ticked down in a February 28th blowout defeat of the Pistons, when Rick Mahorn would elbow Price, giving him a concussion and knocking him out of the next 2 games. And then over the remainder of the season, Price saw his overall shooting drop by 8%, while the Cavs managed just a 15-13 record, and the Pistons went on a tear. And while it's all speculation, you can't help but wonder, if Price never gets that concussion, do the Cavs have a better end to the season, and in turn a better seeding for the playoffs? Because with the record they did finish with, they would be playing Jordan and the Bulls again. And unfortunately, Price struggles continued, as he entered the playoffs with a groin injury. Each game of this series was decided by 8 points or less, but Game 1 went to Chicago after Price sat out. Then although Cleveland evened it, Price shot just 5 of 18 in Game 2. Then in a Game 3 loss, he went 1 of 12 from the field. But with their season on the line, he finally came alive, putting up 24 points and 7 assists in a Game 4 win. Then although he had an efficient 23 points in the series decider, Michael Jordan got the final say.
He looks, he gives to Jordan. Jordan to the circle, puts the shot in the air. Good! The game's over, and the Bulls...
So Cleveland had lost another 5-game series to the Bulls, with Price's all-star year seeing him average about 19 points, 8.5 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. Just a few games into the following season, Cleveland made a head-scratching move, trading their star swingman Ron Harper for a package headlined by Danny Ferry. And while this was a huge loss, it would open the door for another guard to show his worth, as Craig Elo would have his breakout season in 1990, forming a dead-eye backcourt with Price. And while Price kept doing his thing, the Cavs also got hit hard with injuries. Not only did Nance miss 20 games, but Daugherty was sidelined with foot issues and didn't make his debut until late January. So it was up to Price to keep the team afloat, as a healthy Price was the only hope the Cavs had to remain competitive, with Price leading the team in scoring on a career-high average. And those numbers would only get higher when Daugherty came back, and the duo could resurrect their 2-man game. But Price wasn't just scoring, he was passing too, dropping over 9 dimes per night, which included a career-high 20 assists in a late-season win over Atlanta. And while he wouldn't make another 50-40-90 appearance, defenses were able to send a lot more at him with so many injuries to the Cavs roster. And while their playoff hopes were bleak late in the year, winning 7 of their final 8 would secure the Cavs the East 7th seed and a new first-round opponent in Charles Barkley and the Philadelphia 76ers. Price was unconscious over the first 2 games, averaging 24 points and 9 assists on over 62% shooting. However, both of those games ended in losses for Cleveland, as they were on the brink of being swept. Yet while Game 3 was Price's worst, it was the Cavs' best, as they won in a blowout, then got another win in Game 4. as all Price could do was find the open man, finishing with a postseason career-high 18 assists. But the Cavs could not complete the comeback, as a 19-point performance from Price was not enough to prevent Cleveland's third straight first-round exit, with Price's season ending with him averaging about 19.5 points, 9 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. So while it was yet another disappointing end, the Cavs had rarely been healthy, and they showed in '89 how good they could be when they were. So they hoped they had left the injury bug behind going into the '91 season, and over the team's first 16 games, Price looked like he was reaching another level, averaging a double-double on offense and over 2.5 steals on defense, as it seemed that the 26-year-old Price was entering his prime, until a November 30th game versus Atlanta, when the bug bit Price. In the third quarter, Price dove into the scoring table for a loose ball and injured his knee, an injury which was eventually diagnosed as a torn ACL, as the guard's season was over in the first month, and without Price, the Cavs went just 33-49 and missed the playoffs, as Price ended his brief year with averages of about 17 points, 10.5 assists, and 2.5 steals per game. But Mark Price was a player who relied on his quickness to push the pace and catch defenses off guard. But now the question arose, would he ever be the same? So the one bright side of an early season injury is that you can usually get yourself rehabbed and ready for the beginning of the following season. And while Price wasn't expected back until January, the guard only missed the first 10 days of the '92 season, slowly easing into his usual minutes and looking good, recording a double-double in his second game back and 24 points in his fifth game. And there hadn't been any major changes with the Cavs either. However, they did bring in some insurance at point guard, selecting Terrell Brandon in the draft. And while there were a lot of concerns around Price being able to return to form and regain the quickness that made him so dangerous, he was quieting those doubters with every game and had his GM raving about his resilience, while putting together one of the best seasons of his career as the Cavs' second leading scorer and top distributor, while recording his highest offensive rating of his career. And while it was deserved, it was still impressive to see Price make his second All-Star appearance. And it was historic, as Price became the first player to make an All-Star team in the year following a reconstructive knee surgery. But what everyone in Cleveland was even happier about was that the Cavs were back to being an Eastern Conference contender. They strung together 11 wins early in the year, and overall were recording victories in chunks, to finish with the East's second-best record at 57-25, as they got a first-round matchup with the New Jersey Nets. The Nets were talented, but so were the Cavs. And the Cavs had experience. And in Game 1, Price was incredible, with 35 points and 10 assists, as he would go on to record double-doubles in the next 2 games as well. Then while he had an off night in Game 4, the rest of the team picked up the slack, and the Cavs finally advanced past the first round. Next came a Celtics team featuring Larry Bird, but Bird was on his last leg, and would only appear in 4 games. Price was hot over the first 4 games, averaging over 22 points and 9 assists on extremely efficient shooting. But the Celtics were hanging around, as the series was tied. Then over the next 2, Price cooled off and his shot stopped falling, and Boston was able to force a Game 7. But a great team effort from Cleveland saw 6 players score in double figures, and the Cavs win easily, as they were moving on to the conference finals. But you knew they'd run into the Bulls at some point. It didn't start great after Cleveland dropped Game 1, but they got home court advantage after taking Game 2 in Chicago, with Price dropping 23 points and hitting 4 3-pointers. Then Price was solid over the next 2, but with Chicago taking Game 4 in Cleveland, it was all knotted up, heading into a crucial Game 5. And Price would turn in his highest scoring game of the series, with 24. But he was the only Cav to show up, as Chicago embarrassed Cleveland. Then in Game 6, Price couldn't buy a bucket. And while it was a much closer game, it was the same old story, as the Bulls eliminated the Cavs yet again, with Price's comeback season ending with him averaging about 17.5 points, 7.5 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. So you often hear that it isn't until a year after returning from major injury that a player feels fully back to normal. And based on Mark Price's '93 season, that seems true. Trying to find a way to slow down Jordan in another potential playoff matchup, Cleveland brought in Gerald Wilkins over the offseason. But aside from that, their core remained mostly unchanged. And with Price leading the way, the Cavs were looking great, as they featured a top 10 offense and top 5 defense. Price was again the team's second leading scorer and top assist man, as he and Daugherty were playing some of their best basketball together. and Price would even drop a career-high 39 points in a mid-December win over Seattle. And after 2 years of sub 40% shooting, Price drained over 41% of his threes this year, which landed him in the three-point contest. And in his third appearance, he would capture his first three-point crown, then make his third All-Star appearance the following night. But it was his easiest shots that were perhaps the most impressive, as for the second straight season, Price led the league in free throw percentage at nearly 95%. And while the Cavs didn't have the best start to the year, they only got better as the season went on, capped off with a 10-game win streak very late in the season to finish with a 54-28 record, as Price would end the year with his only career first-team All-NBA selection, and the Cavs would get a first-round rematch with New Jersey. However, Price wasn't at 100% this series, playing with ligament damage in his right thumb, which really slowed him down, as his shot was inconsistent, putting up solid performances in the first 2 games before struggling in the next 2, but he stayed distributing and recorded 11 steals over games 2 and 3. And while the series went the distance, Price had an efficient Game 5 to push the Cavs through. And no surprise, Michael Jordan and the Bulls were waiting for them. And while Price would put up respectable numbers on very efficient shooting splits, the Cavs as a whole put up little fight, losing in a sweep, as another Michael Jordan shot not only ended the series, but possibly ended this era of Cavs basketball, as Price's season ended with him averaging about 18 points, 8 assists, and a steal per game. The first domino fell after Lenny Wilkens resigned in the offseason, with the Cavs bringing in Mike Fratello as his replacement. And while there were trade rumors surrounding Price, Fratello would quiet those for now. But he had to game plan without one of his top players for most of the season, as multiple surgeries would limit Nance to just 32 games. And on top of that, Elo had signed with Atlanta, so it was up to Price and Daugherty. But with the way they had played the past 2 seasons, there was no reason to believe they couldn't keep the Cavs as an Eastern Conference contender. And with Jordan leaving to play baseball, 94 seemed like their best chance to break through, as Price was mostly healthy and acted as the team's top scorer and distributor, while making his final All-Star appearance and winning his second consecutive three-point crown after an incredible final round, which saw him connect on 20 of his first 22 shots. But the Cavs weren't exactly running through the East, barely sitting above 500 in late February, when Daugherty was lost for the season with a back injury. So now even more responsibility fell on Price, as the Cavs were on a 4-game win streak when Daugherty went down, but would still find a way to extend it to 11 games. And while they cooled off after that, they still finished with a 47-35 record and got a first-round matchup with the Jordan-less Bulls. And a healthy Cavs team would have had a great chance to get past Chicago, but without Daugherty and Nance, their chances were much slimmer, and it also allowed Chicago to put a lot more focus onto stopping Price, as he would be kept in check over the first 2 games. Then while he had his best performance in Game 3 with 22 points, the Bulls completed the sweep, as Price ended the season with averages of about 17.5 points, 8 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. To get over another playoff loss, Price had spent his summer winning a gold medal in the FIBA World Championships. But going into the 95 season, an era had unofficially ended in Cleveland. Nance announced his retirement, and Daugherty's lingering back injury caused him to miss the entire season. And to really kick off the start of a new era, the Cavs rebranded, yet Price was still their starter, and went for 27 points and 11 assists on opening night. And while he was still playing at a high level, his surgically repaired knee was breaking down, as was the rest of his body, as a broken wrist would lead to Price missing 2 months from mid-January to mid-March. And while Price came back and returned to his spot in the starting lineup, while acting as the team's leading scorer in his 48 games, he just wasn't able to do the same things or play with his usual efficiency. But the Cavs had managed to stay afloat without Price, as they finished with a 43-39 record and got a first-round matchup with New York. But Price couldn't get a shot to fall throughout the series, going just 30% from the field, yet he would manage to make all 16 of his free throw attempts in Game 3. But overall, the Knicks were too much, as they took the series in 4, with Price's shortened season seeing him average about 16 points, 7 assists, and half a steal per game. But this era of Cavs basketball officially ended on September 27, 1995. During the time Price was injured, Terrell Brandon stepped in and excelled, so the Cavs would decide to proceed with him as their starter for 96. And while Price was willing to play less minutes in order to remain with the team, when Cleveland learned that Daugherty wouldn't be coming back anytime soon, if ever, they knew their window had closed and decided to begin the rebuilding process by trading Price for a first rounder, sending him to Washington to give him a chance to play with his brother. But his stint in Washington would not go as planned, as foot surgery would delay his Bullets debut until early January. Then after appearing in 7 games, he would re-aggravate the injury and miss the rest of the season, as Price's brief year saw him average about 8 points, 2.5 assists, and a steal per game. But now Price was a free agent and was looking for a fresh start after Washington opted not to re-sign him. So Price inked a deal with the Warriors, joining a team with some high potential guys like Latrell Sprewell and Joe Smith, while also featuring veteran Chris Mullin. And if Price could stay healthy, he looked to be a great addition as a facilitator and floor spacer, as he began the season as a starter and was giving the team solid production. But then in early January, he lost his starting spot to BJ Armstrong. Yet when Armstrong went down about a month later, Price eventually re-entered the starting lineup. Unfortunately, the Warriors weren't turning any heads, as they were one of the worst defensive teams in the league and didn't have the offense to make up for it, finishing at 30-52 and missing the playoffs, as Price averaged about 11.5 points, 5 assists, and a steal per game. Price had another new team in '98 after being traded to Orlando days before the season began to give the Magic some guard depth and hopefully pair well with Penny Hardaway. Yet Hardaway managed just 19 games this year, but Price was solid, appearing in 63 games and starting over half of those, acting as the team's highest scoring guard outside of Hardaway, while also doing a good job as a distributor. And while the Magic would exceed expectations with the injuries they were dealt, their 41-41 record wasn't enough for the playoffs, as Price ended the season with averages of about 9.5 points, 4.5 assists, and a steal per game. The '99 season got off to a late start with the lockout, and while Price believed he could continue to play, his body had only been getting worse. And with another child on the way, Price didn't want to have to move his family again, so the 12-year pro would announce his retirement in February. Then soon after his retirement, Price would get into coaching, spending some time as an assistant at Georgia Tech under his old coach Bobby Cremins, and eventually holding a variety of coaching positions in the NBA, most notably as a shooting coach on multiple teams. Mark Price may not be underrated for anyone who watched him, but he's not talked about nearly as much as he should be. One of the greatest shooters ever, Price was hitting 30-footers and pulling up in transition before it was common, but he was also efficient and completely mastered the pick and roll, which was a driving force of some incredible Cavs teams in the early 90s. Like many, his career ended quicker than expected due to injuries, but he helped shift the narrative that you could never come back the same from an ACL injury. And at the end of the day, he did pretty good for a player who was once thought to be too small and too slow to succeed in the NBA. But that's it for today's episode on Mark Price. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out this one on one of his Cavs teammates, or this one on another Georgia Tech alum. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.